and I took Lake City by quote-unquote a billion in the play-in game.
On the North Idaho Prepcast, we're all about that North Idaho life.
Man, you talk about Wallace and what they've been able to do this year. Quietly just being, the steady stalwart up north in District 1. They've been dominant.
From Bonners Ferry all the way down to Grangeville, we tackle the biggest stories in North Idaho sports.
This Genesee team is for real. We know we saw it last year. They're, I think in the driver's seat to repeat.
It's the North Idaho Prepcast with Ryan Scaggs. Yes, hello and welcome in another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com, coming to you live Wednesday morning, 10:15. We always shoot for 10 a.m. typically Wednesday mornings here on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, and X account. If you are not watching live, no worries. You can watch this Prepcast and all of our other IdahoSports.com podcasts anytime on replay at those three destinations, Facebook, YouTube, and X. You can also listen to the North Idaho Prepcast at IdahoSports.com on the homepage. Off to the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see all of our Prepcasts listed there. You click on North Idaho Prepcast, takes it to the page. You can play the show there. You can also download and subscribe to the North Idaho Prepcast on your favorite podcast platform, whether that is Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, etc. Hey, welcome in. First North Idaho Prepcast of the year 2025. My name is Brandon Baney. Let's bring in our North Idaho resident and expert. It is Ryan Scaggs. What's up, Scaggs?
Not much. Just overwhelmed with everything going on in the beginning of the year. It's been awesome and nice few weeks off there. I appreciate not broadcasting last week, as it could have been an interesting show. I mean, we could have teamed up and had me do the show down in Arizona with Lucas, but he didn't get a hold of me. So yeah, but no, it's great to be back and excited to see what 2025's got in store.
Yep, definitely. And there's I just noticed somebody's been messing around with the settings in here. I'm going to blame Joel Richardson from the East Idaho Prepcast. No, I'm just kidding. There's our name tags. It's got our names and then usually some contact info. Ryan, yours still says Ashton Genty was robbed from the last show we did.
Yeah, I didn't even look at that before I logged back in. So yeah, but he was still robbed. I'll still stand on that one, even though Penn State's a really good team. But he did better than Colorado. Let's put it that way. So it's BYU.
You can't get robbed if you're cashing in a hefty payday in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I think he's number 4 on the big board for Pro Football Focus, so we'll give him that. So he's doing okay for himself. But yeah, no, I'm excited. I mean, there's been already just within the last 24 hours a lot of stuff going on in North Idaho in the sports realm, and especially on the boys basketball side, and then obviously huge weekend of wrestling this past weekend too, and some more big events coming up this weekend and next. So there's a whole lot to chew on this next few days.
Yep, no doubt about it. And we're going to cover a lot in a short amount of time. So you may have to come back and watch it a couple of times because we haven't done a show since before Christmas. We were going to come back last week with the new year. I got sick. And so here we are, January 8th, 2025. Let's start with wrestling. I know that is a sport near and dear to your heart, Ryan. We had kind of the Rolls Royce of wrestling events this past weekend, the Rollie Lane Invitational down in Nampa. A record 14 mats were used this year. There were over 500 athletes from roughly 150 plus schools, both boys and girls. We had some North Idaho teams and athletes go down there and perform exceptionally well. We did our Idaho Mat Chat Prepcast last night. That is our standalone wrestling show where we dove into a lot of detail on some of this, but we just wanted to hit some of the highlights. Here are the final boys scores. You'll see Coeur d'Alene right there at number 6 in the team race with 3 placers. It's pretty good.
Yeah, no, I mean, Coeur d'Alene had a good showing going down there, 3 placers for the Vikings. I was impressed. I mean, some of the local guys that went down there and placed and found their way into the placing rounds did a great job, especially some of the youngsters. But then you get the experienced ones, and I'm sure that we'll mention it up north from us, up in Sandpoint had a champion. So a great overall showing, I think, locally. I mean, you look I think 13th was where Sandpoint finished, and Lakeland was just 2 places behind them. at a tournament with over 71 teams represented. Crazy, great job. And then, looking at the girls' side too, we'll talk about that as well. I think the girls held their own with the District 1 and 2 teams down there at Rollie Lane also.
Yeah, and of course the big story was on the individual side, Jordan Tyler from Sandpoint winning the title in his weight class. Along the way, he took out Preston Sonner-Cranny of Minico, who had been the number 1 ranked wrestler in that weight and the defending state champion, a guy who beat Jordan last year at the state meet. He took him out, I believe, in the quarterfinals. Then he gets to the finals, and he's taken on a 3-time state champ from Oregon. He's trailing, I believe, 7-4, or maybe he won 7-4. I can't remember off the top of my head. He was trailing, and with 13 seconds to go, reverses, pulls out the match. It's just an incredible finish.
It's the reversal. I think he got back points with it and gets the W, which was awesome. So great tournament. I think his last 3 matches consecutively, he wrestled defending state champs and beat all 3 guys. So, I mean, that you talk about having yourself a heck of a tournament. Tyler went down there and absolutely was dominant at 190 and is showing the state that he's the force to be reckoned with in his weight class at 5A. This is going to be a guy that he's tough. He's a tough kid, and he was good last year, and he improved upon what he did last year. So moving forward through the rankings and all the noise through the rest of the season, it doesn't really matter until you get to state, to be honest. But I mean, getting a tournament win like that at Rollie Lane, that is a massive feather in the cap, especially for seeding come state time. That's going to be a huge boost for him, having that head-to-head over Preston Sonner-Cranny.
Yep, that's a huge victory there. So congrats to all of our wrestlers from Rollie Lane who went down. And then on the girls' side, look at this. Sandpoint finishes 6th, second highest Idaho school, only behind Eagle. You'll see over on the far right of this graphic, Ryan, these are the rankings. Every Wednesday, we drop our new statewide wrestling rankings, not just individually, but team as well. And Sandpoint, inexplicably not ranked in the top 10 by the Idaho Sport. This is like Pat McAfee when he calls out ESPN for doing something dumb. This is like, and it's a team of rankers at IdahoSports.com. We got to figure out a way to get Sandpoint into that top 10. They're not even ranked.
Sandpoint's been hiding in the witness protection program or something early on this year because nobody knows where they are until now. And so they show up out of the woodwork and get 2 placers down there at Rollie Lane, 105 team points. I mean, the fact that you're if you look at it too, you got 2 placers and you're in the top, 7 says a lot, where you've got like Rocky Mountain with 4 placers and they still finish with fewer team points. That tells you what Sandpoint was able to do in the other rounds and everybody getting wins. I mean, that helps your overall team score regardless, if you're not going 2 in barbecue, as you would say. So Sandpoint showing up and getting 6 is huge in the girls' rankings. And that shows you too that these other states like California, Utah, Oregon, girls wrestling has been growing so much in these other states. It's growing certainly in the state of Idaho too. But you see the states that have a little bit more established girls wrestling, you're going to see those teams with a little bit more mat experience probably finish on the top of the podium, which like we saw with Wasatch and San Clemente from California. But Idaho's holding their own now, and I think that it's the upward trajectory of girls wrestling in the state of Idaho is going to be something that's going to be very noteworthy nationally in the next few years, just because of the meteoric growth that the girls wrestling has in our state.
Yep. It's so cool to see Sandpoint perform so well. And, there was kind of a big upset in terms of, we talk about North Idaho individually. There's some standout wrestlers. Jolie Slider of Lewiston, she is nationally ranked in her weight class, got to the finals, drops to a freshman from Tri-Valley, Charlie Noah. Jolie this is going to fuel her. I know it is. And I can't wait to see what happens at state down the road.
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be great to see. And even getting the small school victories, those are awesome. I mean, you see the smaller school kids come in, a 1A, beating a 5A, formerly 6A team, and Jolie Slider, nationally ranked wrestler. That's just awesome for the sport. I think that you see that. Everybody loves an underdog story. Jolie's a great kid too. And so she'll be back. I think that there's going to be, you talk about throwing a log on the fire. This might be throwing a full canister of diesel and gasoline on the fire for her. We could see her come out gangbusters to finish the season out. But yeah, certainly just an awesome event down there at Rollie Lane in the Idaho Center. They do such a good job with that tournament. Getting 14 mats in there is a big deal. Because I know that space, they've said that, can it be done and limited on mat space and everything else in years past, and being able to get 14 to fit is huge, especially come state tournament time, because that helps just with the flow of things and everything, having those extra mats. But yeah, I mean, I'll beat the drum again. I'm thinking like, we got to get something up north. We got to get something in the Kiwi Dome. That's just me. That's another podcast for another time. But yeah, any growth within wrestling in our state is huge. And of note too, I heard that Idaho State University is going to be sponsoring varsity girls wrestling at the Division I collegiate level, which is unbelievably awesome. And hopefully that's another stepping stone to getting Division I men's wrestling back in the state of Idaho as well. Like I said, any growth for our sport, boys or girls, for wrestling is huge. And adding it on the collegiate side is something that's very noteworthy and awesome to see.
Yep. Women's wrestling coming to Idaho State University. I'm not sure when, but yeah, massive, monumental news. Huge, no doubt. Okay. Big wrestling meet coming up this weekend. The River City Duels, hosted at Post Falls High School. You might be wondering, hey, where's Post Falls at in this Rollie Lane conversation? Well, they went to a different competition. They went over to La Crosse, Wisconsin, and took on some Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota teams were there. Post Falls ultimately goes, I think, 2-1. It was a dual meet where they were just dueling other schools. I believe they go 2-1 and they take second in their bracket. But along the way, Ryder Seguin, Seth Martin both go 5-0 across the competition. So
yeah, I mean, you're stepping your toe in Big Ten country in wrestling. I mean, you get into the heartland, the Midwest. Wrestling's a different animal. I mean, you get, near the Mississippi River, you cross the Missouri, it's a whole different creature once you get over there in the Midwest, and they are fanatical about the sport of wrestling. And to go over there and find your way to going undefeated, I mean, in Seguin, and that's awesome. I mean, for the program, I think it's an opportunity to travel, one as a group. That's only going to help your camaraderie within your team and your nucleus, but also to see different levels of competition and different competition. That's only going to boost you, I think, moving forward in the season. Because, like I said, getting wrestling over in the Midwest is completely different than some of these West Coast teams. And not knocking Rollie Lane by any means. I think Rollie Lane is a premier event nationally. But being able to see different levels like that is certainly a cool stepping stone for that Post Falls team.
Yep. Really cool opportunity for them to go over, like you said, to Big Ten country, which is that's pretty cool. Okay.
Well, it's not saying much now. The Big Ten footprint includes Washington, Oregon, and California, but you know what I mean? The original Big Ten country. Yeah. So
man, yeah, don't get me started on that as a UCLA fan. Wow. Getting to play Michigan last night and getting their butts kicked. That was fun. So and then Jalen Rose was broadcasting as well. He wasn't one-sided at all on the broadcast. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Former Michigan standout. All right. Okay, let's move on to basketball, a little round ball talk. We're going to kind of quickly skim through all of the holiday tournament action that happened in both boys and girls basketball, and then kind of set the table for what's coming up as we get back into just Idaho regular season play. Let's start with boys basketball here, Ryan. We'll go all the way back to the Tarkanian Classic, which was in Las Vegas, kind of towards the midpoint of December, right before Christmas. Coeur d'Alene boys go down to the Tarkanian Classic, and they finish 2-1. They lost their first game to Bishop O'Dowd from California by a single point, 54-53. Then they rebound with wins over Roosevelt High from Oregon, 93-75, and Liberty High from Washington, 99 to hold on a second. I got this all backwards. Okay. Coeur d'Alene goes 1-2 at the Tarkanian Classic. They lose to Crean Lutheran, Bishop O'Dowd from California. They win over Roosevelt, Oregon. Then they fly back and play Liberty High at North Idaho College. They win that game 98-72. And then they played Hermiston to start the new year also and win 91-61. So they had built up a little 3-game winning streak ahead of last night against Post Falls, where they ultimately fall by 4, 67-63. Meanwhile, Post Falls, what were they up to over the holidays? Well, they went to the Surf and Slam San Diego Hoop Classic in La Mesa, California. They lose to Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. That's a good baseball school. Like Archie Bradley, who was a relief pitcher a couple years ago for the Diamondbacks, he's from there. They beat Wasilla, Alaska, and then they lose to Acalenes, California by 5 in their finale there. Then over the new year, they go to the Giza Winter Shootout in East Wenatchee, Washington, and they go 3-0. They beat Wenatchee, they beat Eastmont, they beat Cheney. So they were 3-0 going into this matchup with Coeur d'Alene last night. And then let's talk about the game. Post Falls defeats Coeur d'Alene 67-63. This was a huge breakthrough win for Coach Mike McLean and the Trojan boys.
Yeah, and his swan song of a season too. And I've been saying it, like, this Post Falls team is going to clip them at some point. It's going to happen. And it just so happened that it was last night. I saw the score come across. Our friend Mark Nelke posted it on X. And this is something, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, like, this Post Falls team that seems like they've been playing together for like 90 years. I mean, like, these guys are like 10th year seniors because they've been playing since freshmen. I say that tongue in cheek. They're not actually 10th year seniors, but they've got a great nucleus of players, and they can flat play ball. They defend really well. They're scrappy. They play defense. And, it's just a matter of time. They can score. Like our friend Connor Carver just plays so hard. And he was great in the game last night. And they just got a great group of kids that, believe in the system. And they got a great coach leading them that's got a wealth of experience. I mean, this is a team, Post Falls, if they can keep this thing moving. Lake City's right there too. Lake City's only got 3 losses on the season. This is a really tight race within conference. But they find their way into the state tournament. I don't know if there's anybody that really wants to play Post Falls just because of the way they play with reckless abandon. I mean, that's just a headache waiting to happen. Like, especially if you don't get any prep time for facing that team, that's just a headache, like standing right in front of you.
Yep. So that is the opening salvo delivered. Post Falls goes to Coeur d'Alene and wins on the Vikings home floor. And then they'll try to hold serve at the arena in a couple of Saturdays from now. So that'll be a fun matchup for sure. And it's a game we're planning on broadcasting on IdahoSports.com. And again, as we are adding games to our broadcast schedule, we're reaching out to schools to make sure we got the green light to come broadcast. If you want to stay up to date on all of the games we will be broadcasting statewide, you can click on the Game Streams tab on the homepage at IdahoSports.com. Okay, pre-New Year tournament action in terms of 2024. Post Falls, we talked about, went to the Surf and Slam tournament in San Diego. Sandpoint also went south, but they went to the Cactus Jam Phoenix Hoop Classic down in Chandler, Arizona. Sandpoint played 3 very good teams. They go 0-3. They lose to Prosser, Washington, Rocky River, Ohio, and Whitney High from California in the final. But then Monday night, they get a nice 59-48 victory over Priest River. So Sandpoint starting the year off 2025 1-0. 2 more pre-2025 tournaments on the boys' side. You had Bonners Ferry go over to the Reardon Lions Club holiday tournament, Christmas tournament, whatever you want to call it there. No surprise, 2 wins. They beat Manson, Washington, 99-47. They beat Reardon, the host school, the Screaming Eagles, 66-57. So Bonners Ferry goes 2-0 there. And then you had Logos's boys. They went over to Rockford for Freeman High School's annual Greg Larson Memorial Tournament. The Knights go 1-1. They beat Liberty 64-51. They fall to the hosts from Freeman 60-31. So the Knights go 1-1 on the split there. And that was what happened boys basketball pre-New Year. Post-New Year, still more tournaments, Ryan. The big one, of course, the Avista Holiday Tournament. We were there broadcasting the Saturday action last Saturday at Lewis and Clark State over in Lewiston. We had a great time covering those games. And also the Lewiston High School broadcast students did a phenomenal job covering the tournament all 3 days as well. Bonners Ferry wins the Avista Holiday Tournament. Really no surprise. The toughest game, and probably what should have been the championship matchup, came on day 1. They slipped past Lewiston 58-55, and then they rock and roll from there.
Yeah, that was the game we were waiting for. And I'm like, man, I kind of said it, and I didn't want to like upset anyone, but it's like, what's Lewiston playing Bonners Ferry in the first round for? That was a matchup that should have been probably saved for day 3, but nonetheless, I mean, Bonners Ferry just flexed. I mean, they that's the lineup they've got. They're just deep. I still stand by they're my pick at 4A now. I can't get my classifications all screwed up. So, but yeah, I really look at them to repeat as state champions this year. That's a team that's just loaded. Asher Williams is such a phenomenal ball player. It's so well coached too. I mean, you just look at what Coach is able to do, Coach Williams, with adjustments with that group. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what else needs to be said about him that we've already haven't talked about ad nauseum in other weeks, but it's kind of interesting to see Lewiston. I think Lewiston showed some moxie stepping toe-to-toe in that first game with Bonners Ferry as well. That's a team that we, didn't know too much about coming into the season. I know that they were kind of picked to finish at the top of the heap within the 5A IEL, but, I think that that's a group that can still make some noise. There's some talent there. It's just, there's some youth within that program too. So it'll be interesting. And that just tells you how good Bonners Ferry is, because Lewiston, I think, is a pretty decent 5A school. That's not a bad team. So that just tells you Bonners Ferry is playing high-level ball right now.
Yeah, so Bonners Ferry gets past Lewiston 58-55. They play Moscow in the semis. They win 66-50. And then they play Clarkston in the championship on Saturday. And that was their most decisive game, 74-27. Just an absolute romp. In terms of Lewiston, how did they go after they fall to Bonners Ferry? They turn around. They beat McCall Donnelly in a consolation game, 59-30. And then they actually played Kendrick on Saturday morning. It was our first game of the day. It was a really fun game, actually. So Kendrick lost by a single point to Clarkston on the opening day. Then they beat Pendleton on Friday. And so Saturday, it set up this 5th place game between Lewiston and Kendrick. The Bengals get the win 64-56. And again, I think that bodes well for Kendrick moving forward a little bit also.
I guess we talked about Kendrick. I mean, that's a team with a bunch of 6'2", 6'3" guys. I mean, they've got it's like they have a bunch of shooting guards, but they can also play swing, in the post and post guys up. And that's a team. Keep watching as they grow. I mean, and you were lucky to have, Coach Stillflow and Ty down there. Ty kept with you doing the games down there. And, they've got the inside ear and inside scoop to that group. But there's some players down in Kendrick. They can play ball. Lewiston, got everything they could handle from the Tigers. And that's a 2A team that I could see realistically. They're right in the mix there within the White Pine League.
Yeah, Kendrick is a really fun team to watch for sure. They've got some promising. We know Maddox Kirkland, but there's another Kirkland as well that's a pretty good baller. For that Kendrick team. Okay, and then just circling back to Bonners Ferry real quick. The only concern I have about Bonners Ferry, there's 2 notes I wanted to talk about Bonners Ferry since I got to see them with my eyes. One, they only have 8 players. I mean, only 8 guys suit up. That concerns me a little bit. And maybe they'll pull some kids up as they get deeper into the playoffs and get to state. They're hoping. But man, it's tough to win with just 8 bodies available at state. You can get away with playing 7 or 8 guys, but you got to have other guys that you can throw in there if you need it. And so that concerned me a little bit. The other thing I wanted to highlight is we talk a lot about Asher Williams, and we've talked about Sule Abubakari a lot, and Bateman. And the guy that is unheralded that I really wanted to give some love to is the point guard, the guy who really keys the attack. That's Brody Rice. Man, he does a great job setting the table. He was the quarterback on the football team, so he's used to dishing and distributing. And really, it was fun to watch him really orchestrate this Bonners Ferry attack.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, depth, though, is going to come into play, especially when you hit state tournament time. You get, one of your top guys in foul trouble. How shallow does the bench get? And, you start finding yourself in the mix to where you're having to, necessarily buy fouls, but you're on the shallow end of your bench and getting some pivotal minutes from some of your key contributors, like off the bench. Yeah, I mean, you're right. That's the big question mark with this group, because we know their starting 5 can play with anybody in the state. It's that contribution that they get from the bench with only having 3 guys to sub in. gets pretty shallow pretty quick. So, if they get some growth within that program as the year wanes on and see who they bring up for the postseason run from the JV group, if they get some, decent, maybe they got a freshman that they got sitting out there in the mix that, could be somebody that adds some pivotal minutes, give you 5-6 minutes in a game. That might be something to see as things move towards the end of the year.
Yep, no doubt about it. Okay, and then just to wrap up the boys basketball holiday tournament action, also last weekend, Lapway and Logos kind of co-hosted a Christmas tournament, a little 4-team round robin affair. It was Lapway, Logos, St. John Bosco, and Salmon made the trip over from East Idaho. So that was kind of interesting. Night one, Lapway beats Salmon 76-36. Logos beats St. John Bosco 101-17. Then on day two of the tournament, you had Lapway defeat St. John Bosco 84-38. Logos defeats Salmon 70-36. And then on the third and final day, Salmon finally gets a win. They beat St. John Bosco in what was essentially the third place game, 60-54. And then the matchup we were looking forward to was Logos and Lapway. They're already going to play twice in White Pine League play, but this was a third non-conference matchup at this little holiday tournament, and Lapway gets the 60-54 win over Logos. Now, coming into the season, Logos was ranked and thought to be higher than Lapway in terms of preseason projections, but here's Lapway very sneakily, very quietly improving under veteran coach Zach Eastman.
6 in a row. They've won 6 games in a row after starting the season 0-3. I mean, this is a team that is, I don't think they're sneaking up on anybody at this point. That you're seeing what they've got. They've got some firepower. They can shoot the ball. They pass extremely well. They're unselfish in how they play. And you can't sleep on Lapway. I mean, even though the big names are gone, as far as, you look at Case Wynot playing for the Cougs and the stars that they've had over the last few years. And I don't say there's a bunch of unknowns playing for them, but they play so well as a team. And, winning 6 games in a row and the schedule that they did, I was just kind of taking a peek. It's like, you got to win over Hagerman, a win over Troy, a win over Salmon, St. John Bosco, and Logos. And then they beat Lakeside last night, 46-42. Look out. I mean, you can't sleep on Wildcats now. I mean, this is a team that's they're figuring out their stride and how to play the game now without their stars, and it's a team affair for this group, and they are playing extremely well right now.
Yeah, and I guess I forgot to mention as well, Lakeside went over to the Santa Slam Holiday Tournament in Wellpinit, Washington for the second year in a row. They went 2-0, or excuse me, they lost to Inchalium 80-74 on the opening day, and then they rebound with a big victory over Wellpinit on the second day of the tournament. They end up winning that contest by a final score of 82-53 before last night's low scoring. Remember last year when you did the Lakeside Lapway game in Lapway? What was the final? It was like 80 something to.
Yeah, it was like 80 something to 70 something. It was a 11-point win or something like that. Yeah.
And now 46-42 a year later. That's funny.
It's like we're watching Tony Bennett coach one of those teams now.
Yeah, well, he's got some free time, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was talking to Ty Kep a little bit. He's joining the broadcasting team here at IdahoSports.com. You can hear him tonight on the Call for a Girls Basketball Game we'll talk about here in just a second, but former player for Kendrick High School and still pretty plugged into the White Pine League and what's going on. And I kind of picked his brain and I said, okay, now that you've seen these teams play a little bit, how does the hierarchy look versus the preseason? And he still kind of agreed that Cami is still kind of the clear favorite, the number one team. And then he said, honestly, that second slot right now to me, he said, is between Kendrick and Lapway. And I said, really? I said, what about Potlatch? They got to state last year. And he was like, Lapway's scarier. And I said, well, What about Logos? This was before I knew what the final score of the Logos game was. And he said, nope, Lapway's scarier. He said, honestly, if you ask me Lapway versus Kendrick, Lapway is scarier. He said, Lapway is scarier than every other team besides Cami.
Yeah, that's, like I said, this district tournament's going to be awesome. I mean, because you just don't know how it's going to go. And this Lapway team, the way they're playing together, I mean, it's, death taxes and Lapway Wildcat basketball winning the games. 6 in a row, they can keep it. They've got a favorable schedule for the next few weeks. I mean, you look at it, I don't know necessarily how many they're going to drop because you don't know how it goes day in and day out. But we're going to have a big test Saturday. They play Kendrick. I think we're going to find out a lot. But then they take on Orfino, Prairie, Potlatch, and then on the 23rd they're going to have a Thursday night game against Kamei. So, and then they're going to close out with Logos playing a game against Moscow. Their last game of the year is obviously going to be Kendrick. So it'll be really interesting. I mean, if they can keep this clip they're going, and this is a team you can't count out by any means. They can find themselves in the state tournament pretty easily if they just continue to play unselfish basketball the way they've been playing. Ty is exactly right. They're a scary team.
Yep. It's going to be fascinating to see that White Pine race as the season progresses. Okay. We'll wrap up with girls basketball, kind of hit the highlights of what happened over the holidays. Like the boys, we'll start with the Tarkanian Classic in Las Vegas all the way back before Christmas. The Coeur d'Alene girls joined the Coeur d'Alene boys down in Vegas, and the girls get a split. They go 1-3, but all of the games were relatively close. They win over Birmingham Charter from California, 75-66. They fall to Francis Parker, California by 7. They fall to Sierra Canyon, California by 6. And then they lose to Francis Parker a second time, 68-59. So Coeur d'Alene's thinking like, hey, we're good with the California schools. Let's get back to Idaho play. They start the new year with a 49-38 win over Timberlake, a 61-50 win over Post Falls. So Coeur d'Alene 2-0 to start the new year on the girls' side.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good Timberlake team too. So because this conference, I mean, you kind of look at it right now, it looks like a jumble if you're looking at overall records and everything. Coeur d'Alene 8-7 overall, but they're 3-0 in league play. You know, Lake City's nipping on their heels, 7-7 overall. They're 2-0 in league play. We're going to see, you know, how these teams kind of shake out because they're going to play each other Friday night, and Coeur d'Alene and Lake City are. And then come back next week, Coeur d'Alene's going to play Post Falls again. Lake City's going to play Post Falls, and Coeur d'Alene and Lake City have the rematch on Thursday the 23rd. So, yeah, some exciting matchups coming up for these two teams. Coeur d'Alene and Lake City going to see a lot of each other in the next 2 weeks. And we always know how those games go, very spirited in the fight for the fish, between those two teams. So, I mean, that's going to be a ton of fun. That, you know, both those games are always just crazy and raucous, you know, environments. So, what do we know about Coeur d'Alene or Lake City and how this league's going to shake up? I don't. So, you know, it's like, we'll know a whole lot more, you know, in the next 2 weeks, but. Yeah, I think it's anybody's ballgame. You don't be surprised if there's a split. I mean, I really won't. That couldn't shock me one bit because you look at what Lake City's done. I mean, they've dropped a couple. You know, they lost to Timberlake, obviously, but then they lost to Central Valley, lost to Chiawana at their tournament over the top of the peak, which we'll talk about. But it's going to be an interesting affair. I think Lake City's still got talent within that group, but Coeur d'Alene's obviously, you know, as far as you look at firepower offensively, I think the Vikings hold serve on the edge there.
Yeah. Last year, Lake City swept the regular season series with Coeur d'Alene. Coeur d'Alene won the 2 that counted: district championship, state championship, both over Lake City a season ago. Speaking of Lake City, they traveled to the Top of the Peak Invitational hosted by Glacier Peak High School over in Snohomish, Washington. Their first game of the tournament actually got canceled. They were supposed to play Deer Park, Washington, which I was actually really excited to see because Deer Park had just beaten Coeur d'Alene 75-56. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a good data point. But Deer Park had to back out. So Lake City kind of got a bye into the semifinals where they fall to Chiawana 61-37. They turn around and beat a good Tahoma team, though, for third place, 46-37. And then they have been off since. Their last game was December 28th. That's a long layoff.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to get healthy or something like that, I mean, that's one way of doing it, but I don't want to see rust accumulate. I mean, we saw that. I don't know how that, you know, the football idea translates, but we saw those teams with the 2 week layoff for the CFP get beat in the first round or beat in the quarterfinals. So could Lake City come back out with a little bit more gusto? I think it's going to be interesting to see. And, you know, like we said, they got a good test, Coeur d'Alene coming out of the chutes, and then they got Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene again. And then they run the gambit of the 5A teams down the stretch. So it'll be a nice little, I think schedule is going to be favorable, you know, as you're going into postseason play for the district tournament. I know it's a 3-team kind of round robin, but it's going to be interesting. Can they get some momentum playing some of those 5A schools that maybe they match up better against rolling into this, and see if they can come on a bit of a roll and play spoiler if Coeur d'Alene's going in favored in the district tournament.
Yep. Okay. Speaking of pre-2025 holiday tournaments, we mentioned the Logos boys went over to play at Freeman High School's Greg Larson Memorial Tournament in Rockford. The Kellogg girls did the same. They lose to Freeman 64-31. They fall to Liberty 58-19. So Kellogg goes 0-2 there. That's two really tough opponents for the Wildcats.
Yeah. No, that is. I mean, there was a lot of tournaments for girls. I mean, because you can look at what happened down in East Idaho with Sandpoint too, and I mean, we're jumping classification, so I have to go back over to my schedule. Sorry about that.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good, because I was sitting on 5A stuff. So 3, you look at the Wildcats. This conference, we look at Grangeville and everything too, and gosh dang, it's anybody's ball game. But yeah, you talk about who they're playing and who they're facing in those games. Like that's a murderer's road to go down there for a tournament and step on the floor. Anyways, I'm rambling, so I kind of lost my notes.
No, you're good. I'm going chronologically, and you're going. I'm not skilled enough to sort it all classification by classification.
Yeah,
I'm just going chronologically. Okay, we're
I'll
gonna get
taken from here. So yeah.
We're gonna get to Sandpoint shortly. Eagle Holiday Classic also took place. This is a big tournament over in Spokane. West Valley High School is technically the host, but they play this at 7 or 8 different schools there throughout the Spokane Valley. We had a lot of teams go over to play. Basically, you get 2 games. So Post Falls went. Post Falls goes 1-1. They beat Lewis and Clark and lose to Central Valley. These are all Washington schools that these teams are playing, by the way. Priest River goes over. They go 0-2. They fall to East Valley by a single point, 36-35. They then fall to Medical Lake by 10, 35-25. Bonners Ferry goes over and competes. Oh, excuse me, not Bonners Ferry. Sandpoint went over and competed there as well, and they go 2-0. They win over West Valley and University by 10, 64-54. University win I thought was good and put a little wind into their sails. Oh, they played West Valley in a non-conference game, and then they go 1-1. They beat University by 10. They fall to Kennewick by 10. So Sandpoint goes 1-1 at the Eagle Holiday Classic.
Yeah, and I think if I'm not mistaken, I think Timberlake was there and went 2-0 also. So that's a nice showing. Spokane basketball is pretty good. I mean, you look at the GSL, the teams that they bring in. So getting some wins over the GSL teams definitely bodes well. Sandpoint, you look at their overall record, they're not going to wow you with their overall record, but they've played a murderer's row of a schedule. I mean, you talk about scheduling up. It's like Pat Hill used to be at Fresno State, where he's like anybody, anytime, anywhere. That's been Sandpoint girls basketball this year. They don't really care where they're going. They're taking on anyone. Kennewick, that's a really good team, even though you got a 10-point loss there. They beat Royal 45-29 in that game. We'll talk about the tournament they went to the following week. Last week did Sandpoint. They headed down to East Idaho, but this is a team I wouldn't sleep on them yet, even though they did lose to Lakeland last night. That was a huge win for the Hawks, a 10-point victory over Sandpoint. So we want to know what Lakeland's looking like. I mean, they only got 3 losses on the year right now. This Lakeland team is on a absolute roll. So the IEL, we thought it was going to be, some people are saying Sandpoint. I'm like, you can't sleep on Lakeland. Lakeland's been showing that to be true so far. Even though Lakeland did have the loss, obviously, to Grangeville at the Avista tournament, but there's a whole lot of crossover stuff we can talk about from tournament to tournament when we mention teams. So, yeah, I'll let you continue.
You keep skipping ahead to the end of the book, Scaggs. We're going to get there, I promise.
Mismatches and goes all over the place. So it's like you want to talk about one team, you end up talking about some other tournament that we're going to talk about. So, yeah.
If I had an intern or a producer, they would have planned this all out with graphics to make it more coherent, but I'm just one guy, so
it's like we're trying to describe the playoff for the Denslow Cup or something like that from basketball, where it's just everything goes on a flow chart but goes across the paper, and yeah,
you are correct. Timberlake was also at that Eagle Holiday Classic. Don't want to forget about the Tigers. They went 2-0. They beat North Central and Sunnyside in 2 fairly one-sided games. Here is Sean Kane from the East Idaho Prepcast in the chat. No falling action in this story. Yeah, this is there's an old TV show called How I Met Your Mother. And basically Neil Patrick Harris plays a kind of a womanizer on the show, and he's got this New Year's Eve mix CD, and the playlist is all Rise. He says it's a big misconception. They say a good playlist has to rise and fall. No, this playlist is all Rise, baby. Yeah, this show is all Rise. We are just going up and up and up. So that is all of the pre-2024 tournament action on the girls' side. So let's get to the new year and what happened. Let's start with Sandpoint. You mentioned they went down to the East Idaho Holiday Shootout. This is hosted by 7 or 8 schools over there in East Idaho. Oh, real quick, sorry. Bonners Ferry went and played at the Lions Club Christmas tournament in Reardon, just like the boys did. They beat Lakeside Washington 57-51. They fall to Reardon, the hosts, 59-53. If Bonners Ferry played in another conference, I think they would be, they're 8-6, but they're dwarfed by Timberlake, who's 13-1. I think Bonners Ferry could go compete really well in a lot of other leagues around the state. But, if you want to get to state, you're going to have to climb that mountain and beat Timberlake at some point. Okay. So East Idaho Holiday Shootout, Sandpoint goes down. And like you said, it kind of a gauntlet of a schedule for the Bulldogs. This was a tournament where they were the only team from the North. Last year, Lakeland came out of this tournament as well. But Sandpoint plays Shelley on the opening day, the defending state champs. They fall by 20, 55-35. They then play Hillcrest and lose 44-39. They wrap up with Skyline and fall 60-47. So Sandpoint just played 3 of the, and Blackfoot's really good from over there in East Idaho too, but 3 of the better teams from East Idaho. They go 0-3. Then they lose to Lakeland by 10 last night. At some point, Sandpoint has to start showing some yes, they've scheduled hard, and yes, they've been close, but at some point they have to actually turn that into production and wins.
Yep. Yeah, I think that, you could say is that where the youth is showing. And, I don't know if that's the case because they're so well coached too. Coach Love does such a phenomenal job. Honestly, I think Sandpoint's a very talented team. That's the question. But like you said, the schedule has been tough. It's showing. When you play a tough schedule, you can take lumps. You're going to take some lumps. If it's not going to go your way, you're going to get some losses in that loss column. And I think that's where they go. But how does it show later in the year? Well, they show up, with Lakeland last night and lose by 10. Is that Sandpoint's fault or is that Lakeland being really good? I think it's Lakeland being really good. That's a really good team. Doesn't surprise me if Sandpoint comes back out in the rematch and wins that game. So I think that's just the kind of back and forth affair of this conference. And then you have to play teams like Lake City and Coeur d'Alene too as part of your schedule. There's going to be some losses in that column when you're playing a competitive basketball schedule and you go to a tournament like East Idaho where those teams are all deep. They're all good. That's, a region in my mind that I think deserves more bids than they get to state. And I think Sean will finally pat me on the back for saying that, but that's a competitive area. It really is. So you go play over that tournament, you're going to take some losses. If you're not on your best, it's just not going to bode well for you in the win-loss column. But how does that translate towards the district tournament? Can Sandpoint win the district title? Absolutely. Can they go to state and maybe place? I still think so, yes. But it's, basketball, it's high school athletics. We can't prognosticate too much. The kids ultimately have to get out on the floor and play the game.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. My thinking has changed now. I kind of think Lakeland is the favorite until somebody actually knocks them off. 3 losses this year. You talked about it. They lost by 4 to Lake City.
Yep.
They lost by 5 to Post Falls, lost by a single point to Grangeville in the opening round of the Avista Holiday Tournament. So let's go to the Avista.
Yeah, and that Post Falls game is interesting because I don't think you can necessarily use that as your statistical data point because I really I think they're going to come back and beat Post Falls. So that it is what it is. It's 3 losses in the loss column, but you go down and play a really good Grangeville team in that Avista tournament. That's a Grangeville team that gave Clarkston fits in the championship game. I mean, we saw them. They more than made up for what they did last year at that tournament. And that's a team that, in my mind, is still a favorite for the state championship at 3A. I think Grangeville's a great team. They've played a tough schedule too. I know that there's other people that are going to probably jump on me and like dogpile in the comments about me picking Grangeville still, but I don't think you can look away from the Bulldogs if you return all 5 starters from a team that played very well at state last year.
Yeah. And I will mention in the chat here, we've got Sean Kane, 5A District 6 girls b-ball is nuts. Every team could make state. Yeah, like even like Idaho Falls, which is kind of and well, maybe not Bonneville. I don't know, Sean, you tell me, but I like even Idaho Falls has a lot of good athletes. And so, yes. And then you talk about Pocatello from District 5, and they're, I think, the best 5A team in the state right now, probably them or Middleton. And that 5A tournament is going to be a fun battle royale later on this winter. You did mention Post Falls quickly. I just wanted to mention Post Falls girls did go to the GISA winter shootout as well, just like the boys did over in East Wenatchee. They went 1-2. They beat Wenatchee. They fall to Eastmont. They fall to West Valley by 12. So that's Post Falls there. And then they fall to Coeur d'Alene to start the new year, 61-50. But Avista Holiday Tournament, Grangeville nips Lakeland in the opening round, 36-35. Then Grangeville nips their semifinal opponent. It really, the setup coming into the championship, because Grangeville nipped Lewiston 42-36, was, oh man, big bad Clarkston, one of the best teams in Washington. They dominated their first 2 opponents. Grangeville just barely squeaked by, and they played in the championship last year and lost by 30 or whatever it was. And the kind of the sense I got from the Clarkston folks was, all right, let's just line it up and knock it through again. And Grangeville played so well. I was so impressed by Grangeville in that girls championship at the Avista Holiday Tournament. They end up falling in a game that wasn't decided really until the final 4 minutes. They lose 55-47. They hit some big shots from the perimeter to stay in it. They got some key turnovers when they needed to. And this is what is probably most frustrating to me. We just had the new media poll drop yesterday for girls basketball. In my personal poll for the 3A classification, I've got Malad number 1, Ryrie number 2, Grangeville number 3. Because Ryrie beat Grangeville head-to-head, and I still think Malad is the best team. They're 12-1. Grangeville, not even ranked in the top 5. Absolutely ludicrous. They only got 3 votes total. And I'm sure it was me and Mark Nelke from the Coeur d'Alene Press and Max Oswald from the Bonner County Daily Bee. Those were probably the 3 people that voted for Grangeville. It's insane to me that they could be slept on this much. This is such a good team. I just can't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at like 3A, if you're going to talk about, I mean, like Parma, okay, they're 11-1. I could understand that being in there in the mix too. Their only loss being to Ryrie. New Plymouth has dropped games to teams that they probably shouldn't, if they expect to be a top 5 team, should have lost those games. So yeah, Grangeville's being slept on extremely hard. I know Coach Barger. You think they're talking about that in the locker room right now? Like, you need some extra motivation about that. I think they're going to come in like you talk about it's like a wildcat or a badger that's been poked with a red hot poker in their den. That's what I see Grangeville coming out in the state tournament. Like if they get slept on this hard all the way towards the end of the season, cool. The more power to Grangeville. I think they're going to come out and punch people in the mouth. But this is a team that they're extremely good. I mean, you look at the depth. They've got size. They've got excellent guard play. They can shoot from the outside. They can defend. They got coaching. You talk about all the intangibles. Look at the teams they've beat. Like, look at their wins. Don't look at their losses. Look at some of the teams they beat. So, I mean, like, how can this team not be a top 5 team in the state? I have no clue. I'm on the boat with you. They are getting slept on criminally hard.
And like, I'm not trying to pick on any teams here, but like Melba is ranked 3rd. Okay. And they're 9-3. They have lost to the top 2 teams in the media poll, Malad and Parma. Okay. No shame there, but look at the scores. They lost to Malad 72-23 and they lost to Parma 47-15. That is not a top 5 team. That is not the number 3 team in the state. I'm sorry. It's not.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah, I mean, you look at Grangeville's losses to who they lost to. Were they competitive in the games? Like that checks all the boxes. Let's be real. This Grangeville team, underrated. If I'm a coach, I'm thrilled with it. At the same time, too, you want your kids getting the kudos, but at the same time, like it's going to work out how it's supposed to work out. I don't know what Max Preps is going to be at yet. I don't know if those rankings have dropped today or not, but it'll be interesting to see how the Max Preps rankings view Grangeville. Because if they're not getting any love in the media poll, I think that's just people living under a rock. That's my opinion. Because I think Max Preps would actually get it right.
Yeah, the last update was on Sunday, so we haven't gotten that midweek update yet. But that's got all the data. I mean, outside of maybe a game or two, Grangeville is only fifth. Like, this is the other thing. I don't get Max Preps. Grangeville is 5th. Melba is 4th. I just don't.
How overall wins? Like, I don't understand how that can. Yeah,
I don't get it. Whatever.
It's going to work out how it's supposed to work out, and I think that's exactly what Coach Barger would say. And yeah,
and here's what I'm saying. I do believe Grangeville is the best 3A team this year, but they did lose to Ryrie. They do have some losses. I'm not sitting here saying they need to be number 1, but they have to be in the top 5 somewhere, right? Like that's what I'm saying. So
especially you're playing the schedule you're playing. Like, come on. Like, you got to win over a really good 5A team in Lakeland on a neutral court. Like, that's got to count for something too. I mean, this is kind of ridiculous, but I mean, we can beat the drum about rankings and everything. It's only the first week of January, for goodness sakes. Yes. But if we're seeing it now, is it only going to get worse from here?
Yes. There's Sean Kane with the Malad Dragon emoji in the chat, and he wants to know, who has Melba beat? A lot of teams from the Treasure Valley, and that's what makes state so great. We get to find out which area really did have the better basketball throughout the course of the season. And so if you want to see what Grangeville is all about in girls basketball, and you want to watch a really good, fun, competitive game, tonight on IdahoSports.com is the place to be. In fact, if you time it up right, you could tune into 2 North Idaho girls basketball games this evening on IdahoSports.com. We are going to be broadcasting 2 North Idaho game nights, one in District 1, one over in District 2. The first game we're going to have tonight is going to be at the real life courts over in Post Falls. Genesis Prep is going to take on Lakeside tonight, 6:30 approximate tip. The winner of that game, Ryan, is going to be in first place in the Scenic Idaho Conference. Lakeside and Genesis Prep both come in undefeated in conference play. I'll be on the call for that game tonight on IdahoSports.com. That's going to be a really fun table setter. And then about an hour later, 7:30 in Grangeville, Grangeville is hosting Lapway in a non-conference girls basketball game. Ty Kep and Tim Silflo will be on the call for that game on IdahoSports.com. So that's a really good double dip of girls basketball tonight on IdahoSports.com.
Yeah, and we talk about recruiting so much, right? I think we've hit the jackpot in the recruiting portal here in North Idaho with getting Tim and Ty involved with our broadcasting team here in North Idaho. Like they do such a good job, and they're brand new at this and doing a great job. And obviously, you've done a good job coaching them up. And I'm excited to that's going to be a great game. Lapway Grangeville, I think, is going to be sleepily good. Like, I think it's kind of underrated. You've been thinking Lapway is going to be ho-hum, like maybe what do we know about this group and everything else. They've lost so many pieces to what seems like Clarkston. Every year they lose a player to some freezing over across the border, but all they do is continue to play really good basketball. And this is going to be a great test, I think, for both teams. And you want to see where Grangeville's at. They get to play, Lapway. Do they walk into this game, kind of sleepwalking a little bit? Does Lapway play shocker on the girls' side, or can Lapway play up? And I think they can. I think it's just going to be a really good game. So realistically, it's going to be, I think both games are going to be great games, yours and Ty and Tim down there in Grangeville. But of note, too, just to talk about Genesis Prep real quick, it was the team I think I stood on saying that they could win the league this year. and you raised your eyebrows at me. But I think that this team, they've got athletes, they can play. You're going to have a good one tonight there at the real life courts. Lakeside comes in, a little more experienced, but I think this Genesis Prep team is gonna sneak up on some people as far as kind of open your eyes, going, where'd these guys come from? Because they can play.
I'm excited to see it. I got to see Genesis Prep in volleyball this year, win the district title, go to state for the first time in school history. When we look back on it, we could say this senior class at Genesis Prep, one of the best that's come through those hallways. G Prep has only been around for about 20 years, I think, but still fairly new. But I think this is going to be a fun game tonight. And again, we've got several games on tap tonight. If you are for example, a Lakeland fan, or a Sandpoint fan, you want to tune in and see what's going on in East Idaho, we got Pocatello and Shelley playing tonight on IdahoSports.com. Big league matchup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got some you get the popcorn ready, and there's some good games statewide. So, we're obviously lucky to be a part of this, and we put out a good product every week. So I'm excited to see some of the other action statewide too.
Or if you're a Grangeville fan and you want to know, okay, is Parma really that good? Parma is hosting Ambrose tonight on IdahoSports.com. We've got 4 girls basketball games for you tonight across the IdahoSports.com family of networks. And again, if you want to see all of the games we're broadcasting, not just today, but throughout the season, you can click on the Game Streams tab on the homepage at IdahoSports.com. All right, we went long on this show, but it was our first show in a couple of weeks. It's to be expected. Next week, we'll be back to the normal format, about a half an hour, talking about the big highlights that happened. And Ryan's North Idaho 9 rankings will return next week as well.
Yeah, I was asleep at the wheel for this week, and I apologize to everyone if they were only tuning in to watch where they ranked on my imaginary rankings. I apologize for letting you down, but we'll have them back next week.
You've let down the nation, Ryan. Sad
blame the Fiesta Bowl. Yeah, we'll blame the Fiesta Bowl.
Yes. Thank you for tuning into the North Idaho Prepcast, everybody. For Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney. Enjoy the competition this weekend. We'll see you back here next week for another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.